Welcome back to another adventure with Andrew and a delightful guest who will give you her perspective on all things weird and wonderful while she travels the world and discovers all the different ways of life that honestly should be lived. My guest today is Amina Ahmad. She is here to share with her perspective, and me actually, because I feel like every time I talk with you, I learn something new. So thank you so much for being here. Your perspective on honestly, like every time we talk, we have, I would say, an interesting journey that ranges from like social finance to institutional barriers to how frustrating people are to all the like cool and wonderful things that can be done around like how do we grow, how do we improve, and I'm just delighted that you're here and can't wait to get to know all the last like few months because we haven't really dived deep into the last few months of your Churchill Fellowship amongst what three other fellowships that you're currently on.
Three in total, I'm not complete maniac.
Tell us
Slightly
what's going on. What are
maniacal,
you thinking
but
about? Tell us about your fellowships. What's going on in your world?
thank you. What a hype as well. I always forget. Uh, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited for what will come from you putting more of yourself out there into the world, Andrew. So let's start there. Um, I am currently sitting in Amsterdam.
Amazing.
And it is delightful. It has been tipping it down because it is September. I've been told, like, what did I expect? But I'm having a great time. I'm having a
That's
wonderful time.
amazing.
Um, and Amsterdam, I guess that is one of the connections to one of the fellowships that was
Hmm.
completed this year,
Congrats.
which is thank you, which was the School for Moral Ambition based here in the Netherlands.
Amazing.
But the majority of, I guess, like our work, our research on these fellowships came into play in Brussels. So it's a European, I call it my EU, my European fellowship. And then
Just
yeah, there was
because we've Brexited doesn't mean you can't be part of the EU.
oh my goodness. Am I finagling my way back in? Did we get
Yeah.
political way too early? Yeah, okay, fine. So we'll let it down enough.
Hey, everyone wants to
We
get an
just
EU
suddenly lost
visa.
like yeah, we've just lost a ton of the yeah, okay, fine.
The viewership's
Um,
gone. No one wants to listen to this.
damn it, we should have known when they said social and finance together.
Yeah, well, liberal thinking. Ugh, how dare we?
Ew, gross. And then moral as well. So moral was an interesting word. In our prep before this, everyone should know that you are like the prep master. But it's so, we're so casual, it's fine.
This is completely spontaneous. There is no pre-planned thought ever.
Oh
It's
yeah, of
completely
course.
organic.
I was like, oh my gosh, you're here, I'm here. We should just chat. So yeah, it's interesting the nuances in language and translation for like quite key words, right, within our world, or worlds of impact systems change, but also finance, like as a whole, and finance as a complete thing. And then to have added moral into the mix. Yeah,
It makes
really
it makes some
interesting
declarations,
conversation.
doesn't it? Right? Like, hey guys,
It
I'm
really
actually on the moral
does.
high ground here.
So we were, as like the non-Dutch people on the fellowship, we were trying to we were not kind of, we were trying to explain the implications of the word moral, right? And who has the right to be moral? Like, never mind what the definition is and what it's going to create or whatever else, but like, who has the right to be moral? Which they just couldn't understand and they don't understand. And I kind of admire it because they're like, well, obviously, if you want to do the right thing, that is moral, like
Mm.
moral in the positive sense. And moral in the definitive sense as well. So what's the problem? Like they don't get caught up in
That's
semantics. They don't
fascinating,
get caught up in the
right?
words,
Because
right?
it's a small country, right? So like not to kind of poo-poo the Dutch perspective, right? Because the Moral Ambition project
Wait a
as a
minute,
whole is
I'm
about
sitting right here.
like I still have to stay here after this call. But moral ambition, right, as the construct is all about the idea, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because maybe I'm confusing it with something else, is all about the notion that like we have to aspire to make big, massive changes in society and to use, you know, like we have to be willing to work on these really challenging problems to try to address them and try to advance the thing. Am I on the wrong thing or am I on the right thing?
No, 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 absolutely. It's
Okay.
exactly that track. But I think the difference for them is they're very like practically orientated, like practice orientated as well. Where they are, you know, someone has to do it. We know who the someones are. And the someones are the people who essentially kind of need to like repay a moral debt, myself included, to society because we are in one sense privileged. So let's not get into the whole like class system thing right now for this, but we are
Okay.
privileged. We have, and privileged in the sense that we have good jobs, aspirational jobs within the current economic paradigm. Let's get into it.
Yeah, yeah.
But what we're doing is we're essentially the thesis underlying what you've said, which is correct, is we are wasting our talent focused on further destroying what little kind of moral basis we have, moral fabric we have left. And I think in that sense, moral does incorporate and bring in inequality right into its definition. So what is inequality? And interestingly, double interestingly, layered interestingly, on top of all of that, they chose for us our inaugural like cohorts
Yeah.
um, that they would focus on public health issues
Okay.
specifically. So one stream is a tobacco-free future stream, and the other stream is alternative protein, sustainable food systems. And inevitably, for me anyway, but maybe a little kind of like interestingly and surprisingly to others on the fellowship, it all comes back to finance, right? Like that's what, like, it's capital. It's the capital allocation of who gets the money to work on these problems, and then who, the individuals who works on these problems to get the money to work on these problems, right? Like, how do you bring in people who are like, who have been working in finance, myself included, who, we've had lawyers on the fellowship as well. We have like communications experts, advertising people, people who've worked on like the other side of just like hyperscaling, hypergrowth, consumption and retail. And how do you bring those skills and that viewpoint into quite like complex, scientifically complex and technical fields, but also need perspectives, right, about where to think more strategically or more imaginatively and creatively about what happened. And I think in that sense, it very much makes sense to me, alongside all of the work that we do and all of the other research that I was involved in and interested and curious about financial reform, is really like, where does capital get allocated? Right? Like, if we want systemic change, and not just maybe systemic change, but if we actually want a system to change completely, right, because it's broken,
Yeah.
um, why are we always tweaking? So that's definitely the thesis from my Just Economy Institute side, and from the Churchill Foundation Fellowship side, was very much, why are we constantly iterating on something broken, right? Because I've done the classic, and I know we've
Oh
gone
boy, here we
topsy-turvy with
go.
it, right? I've done the
You're the
classic
revolutionary. You're not an iterative thing. You're like, we gotta break the
it's
mold.
we got to break something, right? Like, I don't know if we
Probably.
break the mold, like, but I feel like we've done this beautiful thing, in even in like our, let's say, our social circle, and how we all met, like trying to work together and support each other in impact finance. We did that beautiful thing where we're almost like all the way around this like massive boulder, and we're all just chipping away, and we
Yeah.
happen to be chipping away along the same line, right? or, let's call it this beautiful glass bottle, and we've all been chipping away. We happen to align in the same area, but like on the other side. And what I think can happen now is we can just like, you just tap the bottle and it will come apart, right?
Whoa.
Like
Is that what
we
you're hoping, or is
will,
that what you think
we'll
where
be
we're
able,
at?
oh, I think we're close. One of us is going to do, that final little chip. And I think that we are there, right? And I think
Okay, that's an interesting
those
take because
chips,
I wouldn't have thought that.
okay, so this is what I really wanted to get into. Like, what I really want to get across in our conversation is it's really easy. And as you know me very well, Andrew, it is very easy for me to start ranting, and I can, as you know, give you the breakdown of everything that is wrong,
Well, let's
who
let's
is
let's put
wrong
that
within that. Yeah. But
let's
I
put that
think
let
it's really important to say, yeah, right. Like, I think it's important to say, like, we have to be the marketers, if you like, right, of this movement as
sure,
well. We
sure.
have to make we have to make it possible. We have to make it possible in people's imaginations. Otherwise, there is no point, I would say, for me to just keep talking about the lack of imagination in finance, right? Like it's,
I mean, there's some very creative people in
what did I
finance. They're always
say?
imagining ways to make money. But
Oh,
let me let
no,
me let me put
let's
that
talk about
into
that.
let me put this into a little breakout just to make sure I've captured, right? So in some ways, the last year has been about like looking at and understanding how does money how is money controlled in the world, and how is money used to decide who gets to solve the problems and what solutions are okay. And then in thinking through that, right, you've been working on it from like the health side, using that health stream, and then you're looking at the food and all protein side as another stream as well. And in that process, right, there is a bit of a reflection to say that maybe we're at a tipping point where people can actually have a chance to maybe the system can change, right? The
It's
situation when it comes to like how we imagine the future is that potentially we're at a tipping point where something can trigger if enough people are promoting it and advocating for it. Now, the issue, and is that a reasonable summary? You can just say yes or no on that one, then I'll share with you my controversial take.
So I will say no from,
Okay.
sorry.
No,
I
go
would
ahead, go
say
ahead.
it's more, I know this is me still finding the language, right?
We're all
It's
looking for the
not
words.
that we are all working. Yeah, I think it's more to do with there are the right people working in it. So I will say overall in social finance and impact finance, um, and actually in kind of any NGO, civil society role, unfortunately, you have to comply with the system, because actually our systems of impact, our systems of social change are not opting out of the damage, right? We are iterating, we're opted in. So we're already, it's, it's not, it's not that it has to be radical or revolutionary. It's just, you are still within the system.
Hmm?
And all you can do at that stage is you can iterate within the system. But what you will end up doing is still using the same tools, because there is no way for you, even as a big philanthropic fund, to access capital in another way. I mean, I have a counter argument to that. I mean, there is a way for you to access capital differently because you hold the capital and you can give access differently.
Okay.
But yeah, so I would say more that. And the analogy that kind of got a little out of control before, I think is more to do with, even within those systems, right? There are people who are willing to chance it, but we're marginal, we're not mainstream. And we're doing it off the side of our desks as well, more often than not. And I say that as someone who has worked, in impact venture capital, who has worked on the side of, funding funds for impact, from a wholesale funding perspective. And they are seen as the radical roles, right? But actually, a
Yeah.
lot of my work, as you know, is how to hit the KPI that will still make us returns on our investments. Um, and that has also been true and the case when I have fundraised for philanthropic, like radical racial justice endowments, right? We are still constrained by what we are given, even if it's given without conditions, right? Which is radical within that world,
Yeah, it is quite.
because we then still need to make our return because we have to protect. So I think there's like this culturally as well, there's something that is missing about how we imagine finance, because at the moment, even the radical imagination within that space, or even within systems, is not to be found with us. And I really have absorbed that with the Just Economy Institute, like having this different cultural perspective from the US. For all of its faults, actually, a lot of our learnings, a lot of our teachings came from Indigenous practices. And actually, it kind of has this really beautiful connecting effect with other Indigenous cultures globally, where finance for, living your life, for protecting your environment, for all of the things that we think we do finance for, and I say we very loosely about like the Western kind of construct of what that is, they have been doing iterations of that type of financing for many millennia in some instances. And then just to bring it bang up to date, we'd be shocked when I'm fighting in Brussels, like, hey, have we considered taxing health harming industries and enforcing it? And there's like big argument that goes on. Whereas Uruguay just got on and just did corporate enforcement, just got on and did it. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you know what? Your taxes will pay for the massive healthcare bill of the harm of your tobacco nicotine product.
Simple as.
I just got on
And
and did it. And that, I mean, that's just one example, right?
yeah, that's fascinating because I think like right now people, and I think I know where you're going with this, or at least I understand the frame that you've put out, is that fundamentally people are so locked within their existing systems of how they operate and run their businesses, how they run their assumptions about politics, how they run their assumptions about finance, that they can't imagine a context in which, we would do something different, right? It's like you say, like your guy got on and did it, right? How come, 50 years ago, the CEOs of the tobacco industry stood in front of the Congress and said tobacco doesn't harm people, right? And yet here we are in a situation now where, we assume that there's just nothing more that we can do to solve these problems, and that this is the status quo, and that there's just nothing more that can be done, at least by a lot of people. We're not even just like social finance practitioners. We're talking about the average everyday person as a default assumption about how things have to be because the world doesn't want to change.
And do we incentivize you to think differently, right? Like, if you're frightened that you're going to lose your job, that's fair. That is legitimate.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. I mean,
know,
it's a big risk, right?
absolutely understand. And I say that not just from, our level. I, I wrote about this a few years ago and the response was really interesting about allowing, the CEO of a bank or a fund or an asset manager, like, they're not taught that they're grieving like this future that they trade on, right? None of us have been allowed or have been given the space to really deal with the fact that we're all really scared, and it is a death. It's a death of what we have always been told, right? Is this is what the economy is. But
Yeah, that's a nice way
the
to frame it.
economy, it is, right? And it's like, it's nice. It kind of feels validating now for all of us who have been trying to explain it. Look at Norway. So they're the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. I think I'm correct in saying
I
that.
think so.
And they this year have publicly recognized that climate is one of their biggest credit risks that they're holding in their portfolio,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
So that's a good spark. Like, oh, yeah, you know what? Maybe if they say it, then we should probably be thinking, oh, you know, what are we trading then? Because everything's impacted by it, right? If you're an asset manager, if you're a bank. So I think there's the cultural perspective, the human psychology perspective of it's very difficult because you think you're being asked to admit
Yeah, like that
that you
you have done
personally are wrong,
wrong things. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Rather than, oh, I guess that's what the MBA taught me. The MBA that you all told me to get so that I could ascend the ladder. And I fulfilled the criteria. I did shareholder returns. Even on the NGO side, right? Even on the philanthropy side, right? Like, I have pleased my board. I have protected our principal. I have X amount in reserve because I'm so sensible at budgeting. And
So
I
sensible.
did
Wow.
everything you asked, right?
Yeah.
I did everything you asked me to do. I even put some of that reserve into innovation, right?
Yeah. Or
But
into doing actual good things, right? Like, you could justify it either way. You say, oh, I've done this wonderful thing for people. I funded a food bank. And at the same time, you're and not and we shouldn't even use the word you, right? Because you puts it on the individual when it's a collective responsibility, right? Us as a system have a business model essentially that is about taking it out of the planet and then turning it into something that potentially is not as great for our people, our climate, our what have you. And so it becomes a system that you need to defend, right? Because you're now part of it. You are now a big CEO and you've done something quite admirable. You've created jobs, you've created food banks, you've done all these good things. And now you're like, hold on, the thing that we're doing is the pot. Are we the bad guys? Right? Like suddenly like a bunch of people start pointing the finger, like it's you, and you're like, but I've been good my whole
there's
life,
that
right?
sketch, right? Like,
Right?
wait, are we the
Right?
I think it's like
Exactly.
Peep Show or something.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
wait a
And he's
minute.
got the little, the little skulls on his helmet and hat. And he's like, are we the baddies? Right? Because yeah,
But
it can sneak
it
up on you,
is, right?
right?
And that's actually quite an insane way to ask people to live, right? With that cognitive dissonance. And also, where are we making it safe to actually talk about how you start to back out of this, right? Like, how do you start to reverse out of these decisions? Because I think that's what it takes too, right? I don't think there is much point. I think there is some point, but I don't think there is much advantage to be taken at this stage in just yelling that they are wrong and that the system needs to change and its lack of imagination. And I say all of those quotes as someone who has yelled all of those things very loudly and very annoyingly to all of my friends who have had to listen to me after hours as well. Like, I say that as someone who has done that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
But where is the use of that right now? Because it hasn't moved us any further forward, I would say. But we are at a timing point where things do feel quite desperate, right? As you've mentioned, funding a food bank or multiple food banks, I'm funding, flood crisis donation, but we're not saying, well, I wonder why those things need funding,
Mm,
because I don't have time to think about that, right? And I
yeah.
certainly don't have time to think about it when I realize all the profit I made out of the product that actually created those problems in the first place is what's actually giving me a tax break to then fund all of these things.
Yeah.
All of,
Yeah.
all these symptoms of this
Yeah.
horrible
Yeah.
system that has been, let's not say created, but like exacerbated by what I continue to do as my core business.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a very vicious cycle, right? Because in order, and this is the thing that makes it really tricky, is that like in order to affect change, right? All of us think to ourselves, "Oh my gosh, we have to be really powerful, we have to be really rich, we have to be something," right? And something in that influence typically requires that you become a wealthy, powerful individual in front of a corporation or politically something, right? So you end up in a situation where in order to achieve the power that you want to make a difference, right? So you think about the person who is a co-worker, right? They're thinking is I just want to provide for my family and I want to have a job and I want to have a good time with my loved ones. You can respect that as a vision that no one wants to like poo-poo, right? Because they need to provide for their well-being. You're like, yes, I want that for you. But then it's the same time that if you want to change that system, typically you need to be the coal boss, right? Like if you want to change the coal system, you have to be a boss of the coal company, or you have to be the boss of the company that funds the coal company, or you have to be a politician. And how do you become a politician? Probably by getting funding from people who run defense companies, right? So it's this weird vicious cycle where at the end of the day of like when you want to try to affect change, this grassroots kind of thinking of like, oh, I want to make a difference. I want to solve the problems that matter to conservatives, to liberals, to progressives, to the Green Party, whoever you want to make up, right? Everybody cares about a certain amount of things that I'd say there's a lot of overlap for, but like the vision and the path to achieving it seems really disconnected from people, I feel. And it feels like you have to become the bad guy to try to do anything good.
I think you've nailed it, right? Like
Yeah,
we
thanks.
have set up the
Solved.
incentives in these systems. Done. Okay, great chat.
Yeah,
Awesome.
good conversation. I'm out. Been lovely to see you.
So,
Enjoy
oh
the
my gosh, Andrew,
canal.
just another conversation where we've solved everything again. Oh my gosh.
Oh
So,
gosh. Yeah, sorry to interrupt your
it's funny
question,
how
but
that happens for us.
yeah, casual.
Um, no, I'm agreeing with you. We've incentivized that system ourselves. Like we don't know how to get off that, right? And it's interesting because I mean, there's so much I could say, and I kind of I want to be really like thoughtful for it because I think you have a very powerful platform. I think the work that you have done means something and is leaving a mark, and it is kind of the way I'm thinking about one of the projects that I'm working on at the moment, where we are talking about corporate enforcement and litigation, is not interested in playing whack-a-mole. This is what my partner said to me on that project. Like, not interested in playing whack-a-mole. That's what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is take out the network from underneath, right? So how do you seed all of the rabbit warren or the mole warren where all these moles then are running around? Like, we don't even want to give them that space to like be able to then pop up. Like, we're being distracted by the whack-a-mole, and actually what we're trying to do is like destroy the network
The
underneath,
nest.
network of tunnels underneath the nest. It's
Yeah,
true,
yeah.
because at the very least it forces everybody to the ground, to above ground, to at least engage in the conversation,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
I
No.
think so.
That
That's why I'm trying to be thoughtful about the things that I want to say in response, which is to the, let's say, the mining point. A friend of mine, she was explaining that her family is like, they are a mining family, and one of the things that has worked like from the younger generations is to talk about the need and the necessity for moving towards decarbonisation, green steel, whatever else. And actually that is being received. It has taken time and it has taken patience, but it's being received, it's being implemented by the people who have that decision making power. Like, the owner of the mine, like the owner of the mining company. So that is small, I guess, in many ways, but is indicative, right? That sure, iterative change is actually important, definitely in that scenario. So I'm not saying that like isn't at all, but I think that's something really important. And I
You
think we
know,
should share more kind of, I think, stories like that and
yeah,
get that perspective.
it, it reminds me a lot of that quote, that there are some years where change happens in years, right? And then there are some minutes where change of years worth happens in minutes, right? And I think I think that's the nature of like what kind of system we probably have to navigate here, right? Because it sounds like, that change that took for that friend of yours, right? Years of persistent kind of reinforcement and then sharing, and then one pivotal moment where they said, okay, yeah, we'll take the chance, right? We'll do something different.
Like there's the timing, there's also the language you use, right? Like this is the next big commodity. It's still the same, it's still within the same framing, right? It's still within the frame of capitalism, accumulation, growth. Like mining in particular, I would say, is like very, like, it's a very real concern
Yeah,
to
it's a
update,
really
let's say.
extractive kind of
Yeah.
thing, fundamentally.
And how do you start balancing that? And like even when we were working on, the nuance of context, like we're working on tobacco, we have to be very clear we're working on industrial manufacture of tobacco. Nothing, we do not touch cultures that use it for rites of passage for whatever. But actually, a lot of the arguments had got like caught up in Brussels about, well, if you ban us, and that means you're banning like indigenous cultures, like entirely. It was crazy. It was like, of course, that's
Yeah.
not what we mean. But then we get pedantic about language, and that's what slows things down as well. So, yes, let's be clear on language, but also like, let's all start being a little more willing to get to
Consensus point. Mm-mm-mm.
actions.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe
I
not consensus, but like, yeah, outcomes and
Oh, maybe
actions,
not
right? Like,
consensus. Interesting. Hmm.
maybe not consensus. Like, I don't particularly want to spend any more time talking about how, thank you so much, you gave me some money to support women fund managers who have a focus on climate. Like, thanks, you did that. You gave me a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the money that you have available to you. And on top of that, you have actually put super onerous
Barriers.
requirements on that money that are not required for, let's say, the men that you have given this money to. Um, and why is that? And I just don't necessarily. So that was a consensus decision. We got to a place of we all agree that
So
hey,
I
maybe we should give money to women, awesome, and maybe we should think about investing in climate.
So I don't
But
think I
what did
take
it get
consensus from that
us?
side though. I think I take consensus from because I think more about like
Okay.
I agree with you on no consensus on that side because I think we have to kind of blitz through some of that component. But where I probably think we do need to find some more consensus is that, when you think about a lot of this kind of the language that we're talking about here, we get a lot of people who will say things like, well, that's not a social enterprise, or that's not socially acceptable, or that is not inclusive enough, or this is like, we will find ways to slice that, right? It will be infinite. And there has to be a point where we can say, all right, let's agree that we're not perfect. Let's agree that our solution that we're proposing is not perfect and not purist enough, right? Because I've worked with plenty of social enterprises, community organizations, social funders, and people who are trying to do novel things, and then they will start attacking people within that movement because they're not pure enough for that standard. And you're like, look, I get where you're coming from, but we've got to make something happen. And if we're trying to go for this purist thing, then it's very hard to get any traction. And if we go for this like watered down thing, no one's happy to do anything, right? So you're kind of like where that the consensus we need is what's good enough change.
Do you ever get the sense? I agree with you. But do you ever get the sense of what drives that purist behavior? Yeah, what do you think, like what emotion's driving that, right? Like what's going on under the surface? I'm always curious about that, I think, when I'm talking to clients, particularly in the space.
I think there's a bit of anger. And I think that's because they see a system that doesn't work on the opposite end of the spectrum, right? And so there's anger at that system. And so they propose a turning up on its head and say, this system is literally the opposite of what we know doesn't work or what we think is bad. And that's why we need to stick true to this, or else we become part of the same system, right? That I think that is the thinking that like I refuse to be part of the same old. And I think you see this in like political rhetoric as well, where people are like, look, they've done this thing. It's terrible, it's bad, they're evil, right? And we frame it as this good and bad narrative because that base emotion is the easiest thing to tap more people into doing, right? Because I think fundamentally progressivism is that is going to be typecasted, at least over the next few years, as having failed many people. And it's not necessarily progressivism that has failed many people. It's progressivism, the type of capitalist structure we have, globalism, and all these three things coming together. But they'll be like, it's your fault. And we're going to be angry at you. And we're going to blame you. And that's why people on the other side who are trying to fight that system will be like, no, 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 we have to be pure so that we can actually fix these issues, right? So I think it's rage. I think it's rage.
Which is so understandable, right? In so
Yeah.
many ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like how far does like rage, like where is that almost pressure point, right? Like where rage is good and it's momentum building before it collapses you, right? You're not thinking
Yeah.
necessarily about you not even not you're not thinking like you have forgotten what you were there for, right? Because you're exhausted, right? Rage exhausts you as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's only so much that can be done under a rage kind of like mentality. And I think this happens on both sides of like, I bring up the political spectrum because there's been a lot of heated stuff right now. And I think anger is fueling a lot of people to make political decisions that necessarily don't seem to represent their values, right? Which is an interesting one because a lot of people make decisions based off of their values to say, oh, I would do this thing if it was me. But then when anger comes in, they sometimes lose track of their values and are willing to say things like, you know what, I don't mind help. Like, for instance, they may have a value, like, I love to help people, but I don't want blah. Let's just say immigrants, right? And they'll be like, boom, and I don't want immigrants, right? But they might be a wonderfully nice person in the village or a wonderfully nice person in the neighborhood. And you're like, well, that's really not exactly how I understood your values, right? And it's those kind of rage moments that occur in, um, I don't want to, I would say that underpin some of the decisions behind like the existing systems, which is why you see things like pushback against ESG funds, right? Because in some ways it represents like the values that they find against them somehow, that they are too woke or something, right?
I was wondering when we'd get to the word, but yes, exactly. It's true. That's so true.
Yeah, it's
It's a
tough.
very, and again, it comes to the wording, right? Like, what are we here to do? Like, I'm not here to argue with you about words.
Hmm.
Um, I want to be, maybe, well, I say this, maybe I am here, not to necessarily argue with you about words, but to redefine some of your words, right? Like, not you, but the the systems that I'm finding destructive and I think are short-sighted and lack this imagination because they are in denial, that they will, that economic paradigm is running out. Like the fact that, these sovereign wealth funds are recognizing that assets backed to, you know, assets that are in imminent climate crisis danger have recognized they cannot value them in the same way. I think that is that's what I'm talking about. Like, okay, does that mean that you are now going to, and what I call for a lot in my, future economies work is let's start with, we need to dismantle this is whatever we need to do, but let's start with reframing risk, right?
Okay.
So rather than risk being how do we protect our margin, because that's essentially all it is, right? You're going to get so many comments about, well, actually, that's not what risk is, in fact.
I
But
like the
anyway,
definition. I like it. Go for it.
so I'm just being basic, okay?
Yeah, basic
It's
conversations
more
about
for
risk.
me. It's just like it's so basic, whatever. Like I just didn't want to use the B at the end, the
Oh, it's
alliteration.
funny.
So it's like, how about we talk about risk as what can we collectively not afford to lose, right? What can we not collectively afford to lose? How can we start to define risk appetite in finance based on that one question, right? So what more will be lost if we continue like this to protect these systems that we have? So only you get a mortgage because of your risk profile, only you get this credit because of whatever risk profile. And what if we stop doing that? Because those things, funding insurers through that or whatever else we're doing, we are losing habitats, right? We are losing parts of the planet. I'm trying not to use like the usual language because I really think that, like, even I switch off, and I hear like biodiversity loss and all. I'm just trying to be like very clear, you know, houses don't hold their value in large parts of Florida because they no longer are insured, right? Like,
Yep.
but why, like, what is the risk here? The risk is not on those individual homeowners, right? They did everything right. They followed the rules of risk, but that risk is wrong. Like, you're just trying to recoup your money, your mortgage, your capital,
Yeah.
and that's wrong, right? Risk is actually about what we cannot afford to lose. We can no longer afford to take a mortgage out with you if it's immediately going to go towards the climate harm that has created the flood risk in the first place that now means that this asset is worthless. Like that, nobody has won in this scenario, right? Okay,
Yep.
fine. The financiers have won because there's some fancy product that hedges it. But so really, I'm trying to talk about like, let's reframe those types of things. And not necessarily, I'm not saying we need to all reach this like decision on what the new definition is. I'm just saying, what would it be like if we were answering questions and creating products by answering those
Mhm.
questions in finance specifically?
I love that. Yeah.
Um, what would happen? What would happen? And it's quite complicated to follow through as a line of thought. I had a lot of editing by my editors at this one's for the Just Economy Institute. Like how do we actually make that relevant to the practitioners, right? Like to people who can make those decisions, who do create products, who do move and allocate capital in that system. It's interesting because it is around, there's just so much that's linked to that one question.
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
think because it
How do you
underpins
design,
so many
right, to
decisions.
withstand? Yeah, and that's risk, right? But like ultimately we're asking like, or what I'm asking in the research, right, is it didn't give me an answer, but it gave me the right questions to ask, I think, for this next phase, which is how do we design to withstand a resource constrained future, right? All these things that I've just said, like that's the summary.
That's cool. No, that's amazing. And I think fundamentally No, I love that because, like, that's such a meaningful question to ask, that people we that changes the fundamental assumptions that we have, right? And I think for those who are just profit oriented, right? Asking big questions like that is where the big alpha comes from, right? And then for those who are not for just financially oriented, and asking fundamental questions about how we live our lives, right? I think that question is something every person can fundamentally ask themselves, right? Like if you were to say that we're living in a resource constrained world, right? And I think this is where our hubris as people has really kind of like gotten just off the wall crazy, is that we assume everything is unlimited, right? Like that is the way we live our lives. Like on a day-to-day basis, I turn the tap on, I turn the light on, and it's just good, and I'm just gonna keep it on, and it's just gonna keep running, right? Or people who take like 16-hour baths, right? You're like, I'm just gonna sit here and let my jacuzzi run for 16 days, and I'm gonna pump new water in all the time, right? Like these things are not infinite, but our set of assumptions has assumed like that our resources are infinite. So this notion of a resource constrained world is one that applies to like high finance, but it also applies to like you go into the supermarket.
For sure. I think there's so much to be had from it. It's interesting to me, and I know we've spoken about this. It's I was so sure, Andrew, like even myself, right? I was so sure I would come out with some real concrete answers, right? And even some of the stuff that I've written recently, it still had these are the 5 things that you can think about and do. But ultimately, the real kind of frustratingly for me and someone like me, I know you're laughing because uh, is that it came back with go and be patient with people and ask them these questions instead, rather than go in there and tell these people this is exactly what you need to do and we'll fix everything. So I know
Yeah,
you can laugh because you know me. Yeah. So
that's funny.
it's, yeah, it got me, it really, it caught me short that actually, darn it, like it is very complex, but also in many ways does not need to be as complex for sure as we make it.
Mm,
Like some things are just really, really scary and really, really simple. And one of them is that our resources are finite. We need to act accordingly, and we are not because of our short term. And yeah, we can get all like economic theory about it and
mm,
political economy theory around, it's a capitalist system, growth is the only thing that it knows or whatever. But agreed, understood. I do not know what to do with that information anymore. So can we start to, within that system,
yeah.
at the very least, start to do things that will maybe find us a get out clause, that will find us an escape hatch door where, fine, I am not smart enough to know how to destroy capitalism, but I could take maybe a good chunk of the capital out of that system into and pull it into the orbit of a different system, maybe.
But yeah,
And I
why
think
not?
that is possible. And I think this is like, but this is a quote as well. Like it keeps ringing through my brain around. It's the famous Audre Lorde quote, and I realized as I was rereading it in preparation for this conversation, we have that quote is never complete. So the master's tools will never change will never bring down the master's house. And that's
Mm.
also just like I've derived from that bit of the quote. The end of that quote is so powerful. And I wrote it down. It was, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. And the word genuine within that, right? I just thought, what a beautiful and elegant way for us to all speak up, rather than talking about systemic change and structural change and transformation and the rest of it. I thought, just yeah, genuine change. That's all we're asking for, right? Like it's not, or that's what we think is the answer, and that's all we're trying to do. And it's such a gentle but powerful word. I think also that takes a lot of this heat out of the conversations too, maybe. But anyway, that struck me. And then I don't know if you've heard of Black Liturgies, but I really recommend. It's a project by Cole Arthur Riley, and it's a book also
Okay.
now. It's beautiful in many, many ways and for many, many reasons. Um,
Check it out. Yeah,
but
that'd be really cool.
one of like the modernizations of, I guess, the quote or the up to date is co-opting the methods of the oppressor will not set us free or get us free, rather.
I
But
like that.
that ends with our dreaming doesn't have to look like theirs. And I just thought, oh wow,
That's beautiful.
I guess, rather than me, yelling at someone, it's a lack of imagination. It's like, oh, what if, just saying that alone, like it's like it touches you, right? Like it moves you in a different way. Like our dreaming doesn't have to look like theirs, and theirs is undefined, right? Like it's the same for all of us, I guess. Um,
I think it's beautiful
but I
because of
just
the
thought,
hope, right?
yeah, and that's again like coming full circle to the beginning of this conversation. What is I think it is an incumbent responsibility on us to start like to start feeling that we can talk about it in a hopeful way. Because I think a lot of us in the alternative space for finance, let's say, you don't want to be naive. You want to be speaking the same language. You want to be doing returns on investment. You want to be, you know, seen as serious if you're the chief executive of a philanthropic fund or an endowment or a family office, right? You don't want to be seen as not serious. Um,
I really like this.
and I
Yeah,
just
it's really
wonder,
good.
like, how do we, actually, no, not how do we make hope kind of more intellectual? That's not it at all. But like, how do we just get ourselves to the point where we don't have to prove that we're smart enough, I guess, to be in the room anymore? We've got some of the delivery to prove it, like, and a lot of it. I do think credentials matter. Like, I know one of
Of
your
course.
questions was, like, how much more can you do? Like, they're pretty prestigious fellowships, right? But it's the same for you, right? Like, the delivery is there, the understanding is there, the the research brain, the thoughtfulness is there for you, but there is now an edge, right? And it does add to our own learning, of course, but like Cambridge, right? Like you have learned sustainability at
Yeah.
Cambridge. Like,
Who knows?
like you've learned
Who knows?
impact. But no, but it's interesting though, right, that you feel a little bit odd about that, right? Like, oh, get you, gross. But it is important, right?
It
Like it's
is. It is.
important to have that door opener and to also have been inside whatever, the ivory tower, whatever you want to call it, like the elite system,
Mm.
to at least kind of engage with those conversations. I don't know. How do you feel?
I think it's really, I really, 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 because I just only say really as many times as possible. Love the thinking around, the aspirational end destination of where we're going doesn't have to fit within the framework of what the system is today. I really like that because I think there is there is too little potential aspiration, ambition, and hope that is limited by purely saying we will do something like create impact and returns. Like, well, why does it have to be that way? Why is it that we have to inspire people to act only to this definition? Why is it that it's not enough to inspire? And actually, maybe it is enough, and we are just so constrained by that narrative that we have not taken the punt to be so bold as to sell like wholly and openly and like fully with people who could potentially engage in that narrative, right? Because I think worried about being dismissed as Looney Tuners who have this kind of like hopeful aspirational ideal. But at the end of the day, like, it's like you said, we have credibility. There is truth to that. So what is what is the step from being a mad creative kind of like aspirational genius? So, like, that's not who I'm pretending to be, but like, what is that step? Where does it become, credibility to vision, right? To being a visionary leader on something, there is a hop there that's needed. And I think you are right to say we can abandon certain assumptions if we want to be visionary.
For sure. Yeah. And also, this is again to the point of doing all the prestigious things, right? They are important, like to learn about yourself as well. And we are incredibly privileged that we were able to take that time and to
For
do
sure.
those things.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think, particularly at Just Economy Institute, it has made me think in those terms in a very concrete way, which is it was all about what is needed, right? What is needed rather than how can we sell what we already have just to different people, right? So
Mm,
a lot of the time your package impact or social impact, um, and it's the same product, right? That you're just
speaking the language.
giving like different terms and conditions,
Yeah.
but you are giving that to more people, essentially. You're not profoundly understanding. But I wonder why we had to go and find these people and change some of the conditions so that they could have this thing. What is it that was needed for them? What do they need? What is that thing? Product, whatever you want to call it. What is
Yeah.
it? Yeah, there's a lot of thinking through the way that I'm trying to express what I think is needed as well.
And so would it be a reasonable summary to say that, like, one of the nicest things about these kind of learning opportunities and fellowships and experiences is that you've had that space to at least start the process, right? Because I don't think it's something that you're going to solve next week. And if you do, please let me know. 'Cause otherwise, like,
What?
yeah. If you have the time and space to think about something, it really reframes your whole life, doesn't it? Like the
Well,
whole thinking of
spoiler
each.
alert. Yeah.
That's super cool.
No, you're absolutely right. It's yeah, it's rethinking the way that we've been approaching it. And for me, I will say, I think maybe similarly for you, it has given kind of like the much needed reset and like, you know, the adrenaline shot or whatever it is that's just to kind of bring you back into the kind of the fun of the work. I was going to say the joy. It's not really joyful work. We have to be honest, right? It's not joyful.
Not
Let's
always.
put that.
No.
Yeah, that's silly. I think the people we work with are joyful and they are
Mm,
joyful experiences, but I think the work is not. But it's definitely fun.
yeah.
And I enjoy having to problem solve. I sound like a job interview. I love
You're
problem
hired.
solving. It's like being a ninja, right? Like, how are you given the worst possible like assignment? Because there's just no winning. Like, you're not going to get a bonus. You're probably going to only be hired as a contractor at this stage because we can't have you in the DNA of the organization. Like,
Oh,
that's
funny.
insane. Uh, um, you know, so I think yeah, it's fun rather than joy, right? But this has definitely given me that reset of reminding me that it is fun.
Massive,
And
magnificent.
that to exactly to what you said is we cannot solve it alone. And I think a
Mm,
lot of the time, many of us, and particularly many of us from different, like non-white backgrounds, from, I don't know, people of color just sounds odd to say in this context, but
mm,
from our communities, I think we also come into it with, this is just another A plus assignment, right? Like, this is just
Mm,
another thing to nail. There's no way I'm going to turn in the report card
other than
anywhere
perfect.
below the
Yeah.
top, right? Exactly. Because also this stuff matters, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you
This
want
stuff
to,
matters more than my stats final, right? Like,
exactly. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
I was going to like save my perfect score, it's for this because the world is burning, like,
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah. Exactly.
Um, but you're right, like, it is not just for us. And that's really important. Yeah, that is key.
Well, while we're thinking
Um,
about other people, why don't you give me our final question of the conversation because the time is absolutely like blitzed by. Um, your final thought on what is something that is um, that can contribute towards this doing good phenomena, and it can be that risk thing that we were talking about earlier. We can be about finite thinking. It can be anything that you want, but like what would you say for people who maybe even just getting into the thinking about doing good and having a purposeful career, a meaningful career? They may or may not be in this industry. Like, what would you say?
I'll say two things,
Well, whoa.
and they're not particularly profound. It's going to break the assignment. That's creative thinking. One is like the really, I think, question that seems very obvious, but I think we forget about it because we're always in service. But what is it that you yourself want to think about? Let me put it this way. I read this quote and it's like some celebrity, but I can't remember. And she said, everything I do today is for my 80-year-old self.
Mm.
Like, forget all the noise, forget everyone else.
Returning after some technical difficulties there.
It's
We were
okay. It was the advertising merch break. I got some water, so it's fine.
After a word from our sponsors, we are now here actually to close out the conversation, the last weird placement of a sponsor reel, to just ask,
We
what are
just
your two
fulfill the
tips?
obligation.
Your tips for people,
Um,
and you were saying you had two.
yeah, I think for me, one is this quote, and I think I do remember now who it was. It was Jamila Jamil, so social activist, but also an actress, of course, multi-hyphenate, love it. Um, and she said, everything I do today is, I don't know if she said in service, but it is in service to what my 80-year-old self would think of me today, right? So what is it that I have done that will benefit my 80-year-old self? And I just think in the context of our work and what we do, it can feel so big and overwhelming, but actually what is it that we want from this work? Like, as individuals, what is and I think we're right to want personal satisfaction from this work, and we should also be in service to making sure that we retire well,
Yeah.
and we have not only depleted our pensions, but also not depleted our health,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because that's not fair and it's not sustainable. So I would say that was actually a lot stricter than I was even imagining I felt about it. So yes, look after yourselves
Yes,
is what
good.
I would say. And then the second point is not kind of the cliche of go and find someone you disagree with. Like, no, don't do that. Like, we're already exhausted enough. There's no need. Everyone's stressed enough. But I will say, just this excellent, excellent person that I know, just brilliant human in my view. We do not agree on many, many things. In fact, we work on opposite sides of finance, but they said to me last week, how they approach politics and how they approach being asked like ethical questions and concerns. So just to give context, they're a trader, so let's just be really clear. But it was interesting. They said they're a centrist actually rather than like a right-wing conservative, and that's like proven by this political like questionnaire that we'd all done like as this big group. But I think the important thing about like what he was teaching me actually was approaching each question as it comes to you. You know, yes, we should have our stances and we should have our moral lines and our ethical boundary, but how do you approach each question that is like given to you rather than trying to just come in, which honestly I've got to learn, and this has taught me about that, because it's very tempting to come, oh, I've got just the framework for you, and actually this is the type of workshop that we run to get people to imagine like this, and you know, or this is how you do an allocation strategy actually if you want maximal impact. It's to stop and to approach and answer the question as it arrives. So I'd say those two things, like,
No, that's
what
amazing.
do you want your 80-year-old self to think of you right now, and you want them to thank you, and each question as it arises, and you won't know the answer all the time, which I find
But
really difficult.
I think that's part of knowing, approaching each question as it arises, right? Because if you know the answer before, then you've not thought about the question, right?
Boom, mic drop. And we end
And we're
this.
done.
We nailed it. It's in the bag.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
taking the time, Amina. That's really awesome, and
Thank
I
you for
enjoy our
inviting me.
conversation. And honestly, I think like each one of these chats that I have, I genuinely, I told this to you before, I feel like I'm learning something every single time, and you just fail to appreciate how very rarely do we get to spend like an hour talking with someone about something, and just engaging on a topic at any level, right? Like, I'm not saying I'm like the most in-depth conversationalist on the planet, but goodness, right? Like getting to chat with you is great. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for inviting me. It's always a delight. It's better when we have Korean food in front of us. So let's do that next
Indeed,
time.
and I look forward to
Let's do
that
it.
happening soon. Good. All right. Bye now.